Buffalo Bills draft rumors are heating up as we are less than 3 weeks away from the 2025 NFL Draft. Could GM Brandon Beane get aggressive and try to make a trade up in round one as the Bills have a plethora of capital, 10 draft picks in this upcoming draft, and they could go out there and get a impact defensive player to take them over the hump and potentially make a Super Bowl. We'll talk about these new draft rumors surrounding what Buffalo's plan is going to be and some new draft visits as the Bills are getting more guys in the building leading up to the draft in Green Bay. But before we get into that, guys, if you want the Bills to go out there and draft an absolute stud, whether it be in round one, the 2 picks they have in round 2, or deep into the draft like a Christian Bedford as they go out and find in round 6, make it happen. Send the good vibes up to the 716 and smash that thumbs up icon, like the video. All right, this is what came in from Matt Miller of ESPN. He said, with 10 picks, including the 2 second-rounders, expect the Bills to be active and aggressive. Quote from a scout around the NFL said, don't be surprised if they're a team trying to move up in round 1 for an impact defensive player, said a scout from a rival team. The Bills have clear needs at cornerback and defensive tackle. And we knew that, right? Like heading into this offseason, the big positions that they would have to be filling, and a good problem to have for Buffalo, DT2 and CB2. Obviously, cornerback 2 probably is one of the more important pieces on the defense. Can you guard the boundary? And they could not with a guy like Kyer Elam. And they bring back a guy like Dane Jackson, who they were willing to let go in free agency the season prior. They have a hole at that spot now. Russell Douglas is probably looking pretty slim with the chances of him coming back to Buffalo. And is he going to be the player that they need at that outside starting cornerback spot? The jury's out, and I would probably lean more towards no. So cornerback and D tackle have to be the top 2 positions that Buffalo needs to target early and often in this draft. To take as many swings as you want. You're going to find a good player at one of those positions at some point in one selection. That's your make. But if the Bills were to move up in this draft, there are a plethora of great players at both these spots to go out there and select, but the top 2, the top 1 at each position, probably not a chance. Travis Hunter out of Colorado, obviously, everybody knows about the Heisman. He's a freak, plays both ways, and any team that's drafting in the top 3, where he will be selected, is not going to be moving out of that spot. What about Mason Graham out of Michigan? Another player who people have penciled in as a certified All-Pro in the middle there. Well, it's not likely that he ends up making it past the 5th pick in the draft, and I'm not so sure that Buffalo is going to be willing to move high up into the top 10. Maybe on the back end, if they fall in love with the prospect that they just feel like they cannot pass up on, that the top half of the top 10 doesn't seem like somewhere that Buffalo will go and trade up into. So these 2 guys, unfortunately, very likely that they will not become Buffalo Bills. But what about the defensive tackle position? And what about some guys that could be available around or go predicted to be a little bit before Buffalo's pick at 30 in the first round? Kenneth Grant has been getting mocked to Buffalo in a plethora of different mocks. I've seen him go a little bit higher, and I've seen him go a little bit lower than pick 30 as of late. What about Walter Nolan, who people love the traits that he possesses out there on the football field, but there are some character and effort concerns with him. But as far as the production and what he's been able to do physically on the football field, he is a specimen, and I would love if Walter Nolan became a Buffalo Bill. Derek Harmon is somebody who's moving up rapidly in the draft boards out of Oregon. I've seen him go as high as like 11 or 12 to San Francisco. I've also seen him fall into the 2nd round, so a possibility there for Buffalo. What about Tyleik Williams, who's gotten mocked to the Bills a couple of times, sometimes all the way late into the 2nd round, but they've got him coming in for a top 30 visit. They could be looking at him potentially as the 30th overall pick in this draft. So a plethora of good defensive tackles in the range for Buffalo to either trade up a couple of spots to go select and make sure they nab one of these guys, or stick at 30 and end up selecting whoever's still on the board for them at that spot. What about cornerback, though? Because there are guys at this position that are can't-miss prospects, in my opinion, like a Jahdae Barron. He has been somebody who I think just totally fits what Buffalo can give to him, right? A player who can play wherever he wants on the football field. He can play safety if you want. He can play nickel corner, but he also can be that outside CB who's worked a ton in zone coverage, is the freak physically, and I think has a lot of upside. It could be a day 1 starter in the NFL. Will Johnson, ball hawk, and he kind of fluctuates all over the top 32 picks of the first round. Some have him falling out. Some have him going all the way in the top 15, not getting past the Dolphins there in the middle of the first round. But he could end up falling into the 20s, and could Buffalo go make a trade up for a guy like him? What about Trey Amos? He's been getting mocked a ton. We'll talk about him a little bit more in a little bit, but he is an excellent player, really physical on the outside, and that true boundary corner that could be a day one starter. Maxwell Harrison, on the other hand, he's a guy who faced injury back at 24, but he has blazing speed, ran the fastest 40-yard dash at the combine, is more of a man-to-man corner and needs a little bit more refining. Could see a little bit of mentorship and second string work in his future as a rookie, but down the line could be an excellent corner in this NFL. Probably has some of the most upside out of any of these four guys. I'd be ecstatic out of the 8 players that we just talked about if the Bills came out of the first round with any single one of them. Like, I would be fired up about it. They're filling a position of need, and all 8 of those guys, the top 5 corners and defensive tackles in this draft are all, borderline startable guys day one. So I'm fired up if the Bills go out there and draft any one of those guys. Could they go up and potentially trade up and get aggressive? Yeah, that's a real possibility. And if it's for a guy like Jahdae Barron or something like that, man, I'm going to be jumping for joy for the Buffalo Bills next season. What do you guys think, though? Should the Bills get aggressive? Should they trade up in round 1 of the NFL draft if the right guy is available? Listen, they have 10 picks. They have a lot of, artillery in their back pockets to be able to give to a team and just decide to move up if they really fall in love with the prospect. Type Y for yes, type N for no on whether or not you guys think the Bills should jump up in the first round of the NFL draft or not. All right, so the Bills have had a couple of pre-draft visits to this point. These are the ones that we've already talked about on the show. Shavon Ravel Jr. out of East Carolina, super physical freak of a corner. Love the way that he plays, but coming off a torn ACL. Oluwafemi Oladejo from UCLA, the pass rusher. So, we were kind of intrigued that the Bills brought in a true pass rusher before they ended up bringing in an interior defensive lineman. And they brought in Isaiah Bond out of Texas, the speedy wide receiver. In a little bit of hot water right now. We'll keep monitors on Isaiah Bond, but not somebody who the Bills would probably be too concerned about selecting at pick 30 anyway. And that's kind of what I'm focused on at this point. Now, new visits that have been announced, and some kind of old and I didn't really realize were going on, but this was never official by any agency or the Bills coming out and saying that they're hosting him. Trey Amos, who we just talked about at that corner spot, did confirm with Ian Rappaport and Mike Garafolo that he has a pre-draft visit scheduled with the Buffalo Bills. So that's awesome news, because I think this is somebody that could jump in right away and start at that CB2 spot for Buffalo. Last year in Oxford, he was absolutely awesome. Did allow 2 touchdowns, but man, 16 PBUs, 3 picks. He gets his hand on the football, allowed a passer rating of 54.5, and only allowed about 50% of passes to be completed his way. Like, he played a ton of balls, a ton of snaps, and this is a guy who has jumped through the ranks of the collegiate football circuit. He came from Alabama to Ole Miss this past year, but spent his other 2 first seasons in college football in the Sun Belt, playing for Louisiana Lafayette. Like, he's balled out for them before too. And this is a guy who, has the traits of a corner that the Bills want. He's a guy who can go out there and tackle in the open field. He's an aggressive player on the football when it's in the air. And when an open field runner is right in front of him, he has no fear at being able to go and tackle. The Bills love cornerbacks who will go out there and get physical and meet players at the line of scrimmage. He can actually help in the run game a little bit as well as a blitzer. So I like Trey Amos a lot, and so does Field Yates of ESPN, who said this. He said, Trey Amos is probably the one that I think about most often with the Bills as far as an ideal fit in the Buffalo scheme. Just because of the style of play they want to roll out defensively, and then also the style of play that Amos has available in his bag. And like I mentioned, he would start day one for the Buffalo Bills, and I would have no problems with it. I would be fired up, jacked up, hyped if Trey Amos got his name called for the Bills at number 30. I also don't think it's a player that the Bills would necessarily have to go up and move and get, so they could keep all their draft capital. Maybe they end up moving up in the second round and going selecting one of the other names that we talked about in the at the defensive tackle spot. That could be a total option for Buffalo. I like Amos's fit a lot, and I'm excited that he's coming for a pre-draft visit this weekend. What about this from Ryan Talbot? Shout out to my guy Ryan. He said a big one, Bills Mafia. The Bills will be hosting Ohio State defensive tackle Tyleik Williams. There we go, another name we just talked about on a pre-draft visit. Williams is excellent against the run and has strong comparisons to Aleem McNeil of the Detroit Lions, who just got a massive contract extension, nearly $100 million. The Buckeyes prospect would feel a big need on Buffalo's defensive line at pick 30. He absolutely would. And this is a dual threat of a defensive tackle. Yes, he's massive. He's over 300 pounds. He's a run stuffer. But look at that. Getting to the quarterback, 21 pressures in 2024, 2.5 sacks as well, and is able to get his hands on the football a little bit. Give me a little PBU there, Tyleik. And this is a guy who's been a consistent producer at Ohio State for every season that he's been a part of the program. Burst onto the scene as a freshman with 5 sacks, had 21 pressures, and his stock dropped a little bit in 2022, came back his junior and senior year, and has absolutely balled out. 5.5 sacks over the last 2 seasons. I mean, listen, what the Bills need to do is just plug up the middle of the field. Like, it's been the one thing that they cannot do for the past half decade, and that's go out there and defend the run and just have somebody who can stuff up the middle. Tyleik Williams can absolutely make that happen. He is a freak of nature and is a guy who, has just shown that he can consistently produce, has national championship pedigree, and that's something I think the Bills need in the middle of that defensive line. Last pre-draft visit that we'll discuss on today's show, and this is kind of a big one because this isn't a player that's exactly getting mocked around in the range of Buffalo's number 30 overall draft pick. The Bills will host Texas A&M edge Shemar Stewart to a pre-draft visit tomorrow, and this will be on Saturday, so very interesting there. He will then visit the Chicago Bears on Monday. And like I said, this is a player who you'd probably have to trade up into the late teens, early 20s to go up there and select. A physical specimen at the edge rusher spot. Did not put a ton of production up in College Station this past year, but the traits and the physical attributes that he possesses, wow, NFL GMs. Like, he jumps off of the page as an absolute freak. Think about a guy like Chop Robinson last year, who was getting all of the pre-draft buzz, but he didn't have exactly a ton of production at Penn State. I feel like Shemar Stewart kind of falls in that bucket as well. 39 pressures, though. Like, you compare pressures to deflections in basketball when sacks or steals. Like, he's getting to the quarterback. He's making life hell back there for the signal callers. And this is a guy who's gotten better every single season that he's been a member of the Aggies. Yes, he's never put up crazy sack numbers, but look at the pressures. Look at the ability to get the ball out of the ball carrier's hand. You got a forced fumble this past year as well, and a career high 30 tackles in total. He's actually a really good run stopper and kind of doesn't have a huge bag when it comes to pass rush moves. So, like, this is a player who kind of fits what Buffalo wants to achieve, right? Is being able to stop the run. Shemar Stewart can absolutely do that. He has his one good pass rush move is a bull rush, and that's not exactly something that consistently works at the next level if that's the only thing in your bag. And you can never have too many guys on the edge if you're Buffalo. Like, think about it. Joey Bosa, and this is a guy who needs development as a player, no doubt about it, but has all the traits to be able to go out there and be a stud eventually down the line. But you got to think about what Buffalo's got on the defensive line right now. They have pass rushers and interior defensive linemen who will be facing suspension. They have Joey Bosa, who's played 9 games in the past 2 seasons and is getting older, is on a 1-year contract. So, like, edge would not be the worst place for Buffalo to look early on in this draft. And if they're in love with a guy like Shemar Stewart, then why not? He fits in, very well as somebody who can develop under these veteran pass rushers, who can show him the ropes. I love the idea of bringing him to Buffalo, but if you got to give up a ton to get him, it's not exactly somebody I'm super in love with Buffalo having to give a treasure trove of draft capital to go up and select. But out of the players that we talked about visiting Buffalo this week, let me know which one are you most inclined to go out there and hit draft on. If it's Trey Amos, give me a TA down in the comments. If it's Tyleik Williams, what about a TW? And then if it's Shemar Stewart, drop a double S in the comments section. These are 3 excellent prospects, and I'd be happy if Buffalo walked away with any of them. Who's your preference? Let me know down in the comments. And that'll do it for today's edition of the Bills Breakdown by Chat Sports. Lock us in. Keep us here as your number 1 spot for Bills coverage leading up to the 2025 NFL Draft. We're bringing you the best and most extensive Bills coverage on YouTube leading up to it. So hit that big red sub button, youtube.com/Bills News. We're on the road to 4,000. We'll see you all in the next one. And as always, go Bills.